So I'm going to continue on this evening with talking about the practice of looking at mind itself, looking at awareness itself. I'm assuming you're all very well established in your meditation practice, very well established in samatha, very well established in the mind that's not distracted. Um, of course, I say that tongue in cheek, but we have had enough practice. We have had enough practice to move into this area. The base is always starting with the breath, starting with developing calm. And the practice of where we turn our awareness on awareness itself, sometimes it might just be after 15 or 20 minutes when you're in a still enough or quiet enough space to be able to put your attention there. It may not be something that you can easily access, um, but keep trying, keep trying. Um, and for some of you, it may be after a few breaths that you're able to place your attention on that. I'm just going to read something here. I don't usually read stuff, but I'm going to read something here. I wrote it a few days ago, just thinking about the class and thinking about what we're doing here. And of course, these ideas aren't new. This is these ideas are part of the tradition, part of the tradition of investigating the nature of mind. So I've just put some thoughts together. So it's called Working with Primordial Nature of Mind. Recognizing the primordial awareness that lies beyond the coming and going of all. Thought, feeling, perception is now where our work lies. I'm just kind of sketching out where I see this group is at. Recognizing the primordial awareness that lies beyond the coming and going of all thought, feeling, and perception is now where our work lies. When you can put your attention on that which is not object, this is when the meditation becomes deeper, more inclusive, and less fragile. Then the path, the practice, becomes much clearer. When you begin to recognize the face of awareness, this is when the meditation really begins. How do we find this awareness? How do we work with it? How do we develop it? Awareness is already here. We just look. We have already developed shamatha, a depth of calm and imperturbability in the mind that allows us to stabilize our attention. The awareness is already here. We simply turn our attention to that. We turn our attention away from the objects towards that which knows the objects. We become aware of the awareness. We relax into that. When we look into this awareness, we see non-substantiality, emptiness. This is the gateway into the mystery that is beyond knowing. This is the place that we find. This is the gateway. It's a glimpse at first, but through our training in mindfulness and samatha, we are able to develop this ability to look and stay rooted in non-distraction. Coming back again and again, resting in this awareness again and again. we begin to see the immediacy of this knowing. There's no movement, there's no time involved. Once we see it, we realize that the seeing of this is immediate. You don't have to sit for 5 minutes or 20 minutes. You don't have to do anything, you just recognize it. It's tricky because the mind wants to objectify everything. It wants to put everything into its proper place to contextualize experience. Realization of mind is to recognize its inherent emptiness, its non-substantiality, to recognize that infinite spaciousness permeates everything. How do we contextualize that? We don't. We don't. We open up to something that is beyond the know. We open up to that. The Buddha called it the unconditioned, the unborn. The aspiration to recognize this awareness leads to the experience of that which is beyond concept. The aspiration to recognize this awareness leads to the experience of that which is beyond concept. Through wholesome activity of body, speech, and mind, we develop and support conditions that lead us to this opening, to this awakening. It doesn't just happen on its own, besides what you might hear on the internet. We need to develop, we need to train ourselves. We need to train our minds in the disciplines of samatha and mindfulness. That's why the Buddha taught the Eightfold Noble Path. For this training. These days, more than ever, we need these supports in our practice. Just to say, well, just meditate on the nature of mind. Sounds good, but to actually be able to do it, we need a lot of support. Which is what we're doing here, which is what we're doing with our practice. So we are looking at that which is looking. And in that, we see a non-substantiality. We see an emptiness. There's no object there to point to, but there's something. And it can appear as an openness, a sense of openness, a sense of space. So something appears, but it's not an object in the normal way, in the usual way. This is the meditation on the empty, luminous nature of mind. So, that's what we're doing, in case you're wondering. Yeah. So we keep coming back to this again and again. We keep coming back to the looking again and again. Can you walk away from what just happened? Can you let go of the mental state that you find yourself in? First of all, do you recognize the mental state that you're in? Do you recognize when you're feeling irritated, when you're feeling happy, when you're feeling whatever it is you're feeling? Whatever shade of glass you're looking through, can you recognize that? And can you just let it go? Can you be in a situation where somebody upsets you? Or can you look at a situation that you find upsetting and understand it's not substantial, it's insubstantial. It's not going to last. Everything we look at is not going to last, is impermanent. When we begin to see the insubstantiality of experience, when we begin to see that spaciousness, that sense of space, that sense of freedom is actually everywhere. What did this say? I can never find it when I'm looking for it. That's just like the meditation. Oh, it's to recognize that infinite spaciousness permeates everything. Big words, but not really. This spaciousness is in everything. It's always here. But we get caught. So the practice that we're doing now is we're looking at that awareness. We're contemplating that awareness. We're questioning. We're infiltrating. And it's that aspiration to stay with, to investigate, to move into, that allows us to be able to just put things down. If we don't put them down now, when are we going to put them down? Are we going to spend another morning being caught up in? And this knowing is immediate. It's another interesting, worthy idea to contemplate. It's immediate. No time's involved. What does that mean? So we contemplate these things deeply. We come back to it again and again and again. So we work with that. We work with that. And you could say that the uh, samatha and insight practices we do are preliminary practices. They're foundation practices. They're foundation practices. They're building a strong foundation so we can remain with the undistracted. So we can recognize the mental states. We can recognize the thoughts. We can recognize the feelings. See them for what they are. That's the job of mindfulness. We're staying present. We're watching. The mindfulness trains us not to be caught, not to grab onto, to recognize what's taking place. And that's just a really good practice to stay with. Developing that. But when we really develop that, then there is a stillness. There's a spaciousness that starts to present itself. And then we turn our attention to that. The stillness, the spaciousness is not object in the normal way. It seems to be the container in which these objects come and go. And when you have an experience of this, and I think some of you have already experienced this, when you start to experience this, then there is a calmness or a quietness that starts to take over your being. It's not there all the time, probably. But when you touch this awareness, when you really touch it, then you start to notice there's a shift in your energy and there's a quietness or a spaciousness that just starts to naturally appear. all of this hard work of mindfulness and developing calm is only to bring us to this place. But once we're in this place, or once we start to connect with this, there's a natural connection, a natural abiding in calmness. It's not all work. There's a point where we let go of that idea of being one thing or the other, because we've developed enough mindfulness, enough insight, that the practice, there's a saying, and maybe it's me who said it. I've been through this so long, but I've had talks with friends, and maybe a friend has said it. It's like there's a point where the practice starts to do you. There's a point. Do people understand that? I think some of the old timers maybe do. There's a point where the practice starts to do you. You're not doing the practice anymore. You're opening up, but the practice is doing you. We struggle, we struggle, we struggle, we struggle, and then we let go of the struggle. But we've developed enough mindfulness and enough wisdom that we start to be able to abide, to rest in. And you know what else is, I think I've used this line before, but you know that advertisement for Scotiabank or something, you're richer than you think? With most of you now, you're you're more Buddha-like than you think. You're more awake than you think. You've had enough experience. You know what I'm talking about. It's just learning to trust it more. That's a big one, right? The 5 hindrances, self-doubt. You catch yourself getting caught up, screwing up, and then you put yourself in the corner for days and scold yourself. But that's not where it's at. That's not where it's at. Is you already know. You've had the experience. You've already tasted it. So have a little faith in yourself. Oh, I want to mention a couple of names here, but I won't. Have faith in yourself. When we're doing what we're doing this evening, you're touching something, aren't you? We're touching something together, aren't we? And I'm just pointing it out, but it's you. So we develop that. We let go of scolding ourselves. What if you just gave yourself a break? Huh? Just give yourself a break. You know what? You're doing the practice. You're doing, honestly, this has been so fun the last month or so, right? When we're kind of getting into this level of teaching. It's been so fun. One of the things, you know, I sort of had a vague plan in the back of my mind about what the hell I was doing here, you know, and I wanted to bring people to this point. And I think I start teaching this and you're here. you can hear it. You can connect with it. Like, wow, you're richer than you think. Seriously. It's been really fun for me to get emails and just to watch the faces and to hear questions. And I was like, wow, yeah, it's happening. Mm. So the mind gets yucky and mucky and all of that sort of stuff, but it's insubstantial, like everything else. And there's a ground, there's this awareness, empty luminosity, empty cognizant. That's where we should be hanging out. Buddha, Buddha, you the Buddha. That's what I like to say. Buddha, Buddha, you the Buddha. Who'd have thought? So this is very deep practice, but there's a part of it where it's really light, a really light touch to it too, a really light touch. Um, these ideas, this meditation can stretch your mind, can push you, can make you feel like you're banging your head against the wall because we keep trying to contextualize our experience. It brings us to that, but there's a lightness to it too. Just let it go. Whatever your confusion, just let it go. And trust yourself, trust the practice.